Okay, we're about ready to start the video again. If you've got it individually, if you pulled it up on YouTube and you want to watch it at your individual monitor, that's fine. As a team, you're watching it, but you're all individually charting the same behavior with the same student, right? Everybody's on task? Okay, we're going to start it up here, and you can watch it here, or you can watch it at your individual monitors. Okay, how different was it to have somebody to talk to while you charted behavior? Haven't done that before, have you? So look at compare your results to your group. See if everybody got about the same numbers. You just still step. Okay, if you got relatively the same results, then we're going to assume that your data is relatively accurate. Is that fair? If you got varied results, what are we going to assume? Why would we get varied results? Why would there be a difference in, didn't you all watch the same thing? Yeah.
Your description of the behavior is a little too vague.
Okay, description of the behavior maybe is a little too vague. Uh-huh.
Everybody has a different tolerance level, what they accept and what they don't.
Exactly. Our perceptions may be a little different when we look at the same thing, right? Why is that? Sometimes we have maybe a bias. Is that possible? That we would have a bias in our data? A bias is not liking the kid or liking the kid too much. Either way, we ever had to remind ourselves of that? Maybe once, right? So our data is only going to be as accurate as what we're seeing, isn't it? Because what we see is what we're reflecting on paper, and that's what we're going to graph, and we're going to show the parents at the IEP, or we're going to show our bosses how well we can graph data now. And so if it's going to be accurate, we have to view it accurately, don't we? So if there's differences, go ahead. Oh, yeah.
The other part in data is it's not always a yes or no. There has to be a not observed portion, and you don't count that at all.
Exactly.
You don't want to just expect that they were doing it.
That's right. And we all know that we're not watching the student from the time they get there to the time they leave, every day, every week. We're picking our times, aren't we? So that, again, is our responsibility. Are we picking a time when we're getting an accurate demonstration of their daily behavior? When you bring somebody new into the room like Daniel or Raven or Sherry or I, that adds another element to the room, and so they say, well, they never act like this. Well, maybe it's the new student, the new person, the adult in the room. Takes them a while maybe to get back into their regular routine. So if we see differences, then what corrections need to be made? It's on your handout. Fine-tune the definition of the target behavior. Remember, the target behavior is supposed to have how many parts? How many parts to defining the target behavior? You remember that? Remember latency and duration, and remember all those words? There were 5 parts, right? So to define the behavior exactly, a lot of the times we see most of the parts there. I rarely see intensity, like a student hit them, but they don't say, did they knock them down? Did they leave a mark? Did they just, brush their head? What does hit mean? So a lot of times we could be very clear in defining exactly what we mean. Sometimes we're a little bit vague in the words that we choose. All right, then we're going to look at duration, frequency, and intensity. So Daniel and I are going to start talking about what we want to do with our data once we get it.
One thing with one way to reduce the bias of what we were just talking about, like I noticed over here, people were, as they were watching, they were coming up with an evolving definition of the target behavior. So I mean, for myself as an outsider, I come in, I usually have to ask the teachers, what is it that you're observing? And then I start watching the kid and I start seeing something else, or I start seeing more or something differently, some way that I look at it. And so just afterwards to come in and have like some kind of agreement, I'll show them my work and I'll say, this is what I called off-task behavior. This is what I called aggression. And I see if there's that kind of agreement. And if there's like a consensus in the group, then generally you can usually be comfortable with the target behavior. It's only, so it's the kind of like that double checking process, seeking consensus with the definition.
All right, and when we use the word analyze, that almost implies that the results are accurate, doesn't it? Because the word is so analytical, right? So, but again, your analysis is only going to be as accurate as the data you begin with. So if you begin with a skewed view of the behavior, then your results are probably going to be skewed too. Okay, what data do you have? What do you do with it now? We're going to look at one of the ISRC databases, and we're going to just practice taking some information and putting it in there and looking at it so that when you get information at home, you guys can easily go to our website and have a little bit of practice with this. If you go to the handout that says George on it.
Actually, the other side first.
Oh,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I forgot about this. We're going back to the slide that Raven showed earlier, which is showing us the amount of prompts and the amount of time, which gives us our example of how often does it happen and for how long does it happen. A lot of people, again, will leave out the duration, so we'll know how many times it happens, but we won't know how long that continues. Sherry?
Daniel, I think if you click on that green star, Raven has it set up that it will take you to the database. And we sent you all 2 databases. So if you open up the one, what is the title of this one?
Your kid's name is George.
Target off task.
Yeah, this is
Target off
data
task.
collection, one target off task.
Okay,
So
so if you open up that database, now you'll see what you can do with the information that's put in.
okay, so on the bottom, the first tab is called template, and that's just the template. And usually in here,
Does everybody have it open?
Go ahead.
okay. So I mean, this is basically just me copying what I had from my data collection sheet. So when I sat down, it was 20-minute classes. As you see, from 8:40 to 9, 9:10 to 9:25. I don't include the time that he was transitioning. This was just specific to the needs of this particular class and student. Okay, so I just basically copy it directly onto the template here. Okay.
It's a good example that you really can, you guys know anything about a computer, you can really look at any information you want to that you're putting in the graph by time, by date, by teacher, by location.
And it changes by the needs of the particular teacher and student. But in this case, there's a set of frequency, so that's the number of prompts. And then the next column is time off task, and that's duration. And automatically, if you go to chart 1, how do I?
Tabs at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. So this is frequency. I'm sorry that I can't get the whole thing up, unless somebody knows how to do that. On the bottom, you see the times. All right, just a standard graph of frequency. And then chart 2 will be duration. And Excel does not like minutes very well. It can be very annoying. So you'll see, like on the left, it goes 4:48, 7:12, this whole thing here. I still can't figure out how to get it in, like, you know, just to say 2 minutes, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, any kind of thing like that. But really, this is just the visual. So what you want to do is you're going to sit there anyways in a meeting, or when you're showing it to the teachers or to your other teachers or supervisors, whoever, you just see that each of these bars represent an amount of time. Right? It's just a visual representation to start a discussion in meetings, basically. And it's also good because you can, in an IEP meeting or with a parent where it can be kind of sensitive, you can put it on the table. It's not me who did it, the data. It can take some of that flack off, and it can at least prevent that initial defensiveness, or at least make it less worse, I guess, would be the way to say it. 'Cause, I mean, this is someone's child, and, you know, I mean, it is normal for people to get a little, this is my kid, why are you saying they're bad? So, okay. And then again, as someone who's trying to develop an intervention later on, is looking at the pattern. So we see beginning of morning, and then towards the end of the day. Okay? And that's just, I mean, for me, from my experience, this is a common pattern I see. Either it's worse in the morning, and then it gets better, and it gets worse in the afternoon, or it's worse on Mondays, worse on Fridays, beginning of weeks, end of weeks. You know, it's the kids that really throw a wrench in everything when it's like Tuesday, Friday, and then the next week, Monday, Thursday. And again, that's rare. It doesn't happen as often, and that's just requires, I think, more data, but put those people to the side, don't worry about them. This is the most common pattern that I see usually.
Right, so for evidence-based, data-driven, you need to show this paper to show them why you chose the intervention you picked. You're going to show this maybe at a parent or to your supervisor again. Looks like you know a lot when you got it in a graph form, doesn't it? Right? So whether, you know, hopefully the data is right, you put the numbers in and you've got it right. So you're going to be able to graph it really in any way you choose. The more experience you get, the more you're going to be able to graph it in different ways, depending upon how much you know about Excel.
And just because you have graphs and data, it doesn't mean you don't ask why, you know? So it doesn't mean you don't ask why is the behavior happening. That's always the question that you have. No matter what, if there's a nice, beautiful pattern or there's not a pattern. You're always trying to understand why. Just not always an easy answer. It doesn't just, you know, it's not always like right there for you. Okay. Oh.
There you go.
Cancel.
Question?
So if we're not very Excel savvy, we could use your template that you have here, just change whatever tallies that we have, and then when we change that, go back to the chart, then a different graph will come up?
Yeah, I mean, we have available right now sort of the most common situations that you'll see. So this is just one frequency and one duration, and a lot of people don't even do this one because the time required to actually time kids is just, they don't have the resources. One teacher, there's no aides, nobody to help them. This is something that we can actually come in and help with. But the other stuff, we have templates with just, where you're just basically just tallying. And those are from 1 target behavior to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And then it will give you, it'll automatically, we're actually going to do one of these soon.
Yeah, and also if you guys come up with one that you need that we don't have, let us know. We'll help you with that. You know, because we've kind of developed these on our own as well.
We had a question from somebody. How do you make the graphs? This is why we're giving you the template. You downloaded the template. You can now keep this, change the information for another kid. It graphs it automatically. You don't need to know how to make the graphs. All you need to be able to do is collect the data on the form, change the numbers on what you've downloaded. It will graph it for you.
Yeah, we're going to show you how that works exactly.
And if it doesn't, I mean, if a kid you have and the needs you have don't fit something we have, you can call us and we can modify it and make it fit your situation. Okay. Now
All right, then we're going to, now go to our page with George on it. And we're going to have you open up the ISRC template and put the data in there. You all see George? Which one is the first or second?
All right, the template is this the guy? Your template, I think, looks like this.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're only going to use the top one. So this is a kit I had to develop because we were tracking over 2 weeks. But it'll work just fine.
Is it 2, ISRC 2? Data 2?
Yeah, presentation, data 2
Presentation, data 2.
Okay. And then here, I have to delete all these guys. This is something else.
So what's the right?
Dan, what is this?
AG is aggression.
Oh, that's his
off
shoulder.
is off task.
Move a little bit to your right, Daniel.
Okay.
Is everybody understand what to do? You have the raw data sheet right here. Okay?
See all the tally marks and numbers?
You're going to open up the template, transfer the information from this data sheet into the database in your computer.
But
So,
the tick marks are,
and they're counted for you.
Yeah, I already counted them.
Monday, you're going to go 21, then 20, then 15, then 13, then 6.
wait, but are we just doing aggression or off task? Just doing off task. Just doing off task.
Just off task. Just totals.
Just totals. So you sat and you collected data for a whole week. These are what you got. Now you want to graph it. You just go to this template and you start putting in the numbers.
Right, just entering the off task.
Everybody entering the numbers in now? Okay.
Yeah,
Right, it doesn't matter, or you can change the times.
Actually, on this one, the times are the same.
You can change the time here.
Oh, yeah, just
If you want to have it limited, let's say, to 2 hours, and you want to set these up, you can just use part of this template. This is for you to use at home or at school. How many of you have done this before? About a fourth of you? This is a great exercise then. Go Daniel, go Daniel.
3, 14, 7.
It's good they have the experience now to try it for the first time. You getting it all in there?
Yes, but I'm trying to figure out where I'm net 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But 8 is not there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
They match. We'll wait till they get done, and then I'll let you show them how the tabs at the bottom work. It's about 25 till, so we're going to start moving along. Do you all understand that you can change the words on here and not change the function of what it's doing? Okay, good. Let's tell them what we're telling Excel to do, to add this column and average it, and because to get them an understanding of what the computer's doing here.
All right.
You know what I mean? Because some of these people have no idea how this is working, how Excel works.
We have a simple template.
I wonder if we should even show them like how the command's written up there or something. You know what I mean?
All right.
Is everybody about done? Yep. All right, Daniel's going to talk a little bit about the Excel program here.
I mean, I think some people have a few questions what these are. So AG, for me, that's just my made-up term for aggression, but I could call it anything I want. See what I mean? So it doesn't, it's just whatever, it's just, this is for you. So you can edit this thing when you download it and make it anything you want. The benefit of this is that you do have 2 targets. So should you decide to track 2 behaviors, you'll have, this can provide both functions. When you end up looking at the graphs, they'll all pop up automatically. If you just want to look at one, that's fine. If you want to just look at one for Mondays, that's fine. You can use it that way. All right? If you scoot over to the right a little, it'll show you behavior incidents by type. So this is when you end up writing a report or you're just discussing this at a meeting. Let's say the kid had 10 incidents of aggression. It'll give you the relationship of aggression to off task. So in this case, let's say he had 35 times he hit people, that would be 10% of the time he's hitting people and 90% of the time off task. Doesn't matter. If that's not important for a meeting, don't worry about it. But if you look below under behavior incidents by day, it shows you how many incidents by day, and it gives you a percent, which is easier to understand than just totals. So you see that Mondays and Wednesdays are higher compared to the other days. Okay? And that again, it'll all come into play when you're having the discussion. So you say, you know, Mondays are pretty hard for George. You know? Okay. Now if you go to the graphs on the bottom, there's these tabs. The first one is behavior incidents by day. You just click on that. And this is probably what most of you would be using in meetings.
Does everybody have one of these on your computer right now? Yeah. How many of you haven't been able to do this before? No. Okay, so this is the same process you're going to use with all of your data. The words may be different and the number of behaviors, whatever, but it's the same process.
Okay. And again, if you send us a request of how you want it changed for your needs, we can do that. But most of you will just be using this, if this is what you're comfortable with. It just gives you a nice graph. It shows you a visual representation of the kid's behavior for off task for the whole week.
It really is very, very simple analysis. It's a percentage. It's a, you know, we're not doing analysis of variance here or any regressions, statistics. Uh-huh.
If you wanted to make the table large and lines, we just go like, and click like on the 10 and say add a line? Because you don't want to mess up that last line that's red.
Right.
Because isn't that where you put your formula?
Right. Do you guys know where the formula goes? Can you click on a line to show them the formula?
That's what these boxes are. The formulas are in these boxes here. So
if you add a line, you're
column O.
See this up here? This is telling the Excel program what you want it to do. Add, divide, add certain numbers, add through certain days. Whatever you're going to get to do, you put it up here. Now, if you're going to add a line, that might throw this off. I don't know how Daniel has it set up.
I think you can highlight it. You just highlight it and hit the add form.
Exactly.
Real basic one.
We may hire her to help us. She's good. Any questions about this right now for those of you who haven't had a lot of experience with this?
So the formula is up here.
If you don't have the tabs across the bottom, is there a way to find them?
Can you scroll up?
Yeah, she's doing that and they're not showing.
You don't see the tabs at the bottom?
Sorry, I'm not sure how. It's a different layout.
The rest of you see the tabs along the bottom here?
I use the old. This is.
Right. Anybody else need some help?
Yeah, you see your screen is down there. Maybe click the X, the squares there.
Because it says it's time. So if you put this in,
Is that the bottom of the Excel program?
And it should be right down on the bottom here. It says yours.
It's kind of almost like percent occurrence, because it's not like 27% of the day he was doing that. It was of the occurrences, 27% of them occurred on Monday.
We'll have to,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Maybe we should just change that word there then. Good eye. Do you all see how this is not that difficult? Now that you've walked through it once and you can get up, you don't have to get really fancy with this. You can get pretty simple data, but if you bring it in a visual form, it's going to show people that you have collected data, you've taken the time to graph it, you seem to understand it, you seem to know what you're talking about, right? And it's not that hard. A lot of people are a little afraid of this Excel program, but you see when you put the numbers in, it changes itself and does all the work for you if somebody has set it up. And again, you can contact us if you need some more assistance. Daniel, do you want to show them the other tab at the bottom? Did you have...
behavior incidents by day, behavior incidents by type. We didn't collect the aggression, so we only see that one. Okay.
By time and type.
By time and type. So if you do have two target behaviors, it's interesting to watch them together, to see the two together.
Now, will this data always line up with your assumptions? Have you ever been surprised at the results of data that it didn't turn out exactly like you thought? You thought they were seeking attention. It turns out they really were escaping more often. Something like that. All right. So this has been good practice. You have anything else you want to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just look at the first one, behavior incidents by day. Do you see a pattern here?
Do you see a pattern? What pattern do we see here? Monday's bad? Wednesday?
Okay. If you actually go look at, knowing that most kids, just from my experience again, I would say the pattern is Mondays, Fridays tend to be worse. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday worst. So I just would ask myself the question, why is Wednesday high? And again, it kind of deviates the pattern. His off-task behavior jumps right in the middle of the day. I look at the other middles of the day, it's not comparable. You see that? So it's actually, if you just looked at this, it would be misleading. You guys understand that? There's something happening. Something happened at 10 o'clock for George on Wednesday. We asked the teacher what happened on Wednesday. He got in a fight with Bobby, you know, over a pencil, and he got in trouble. He was timed out, and he was irritable for 2 hours. That's information. The rest of the week, did he get in fights with anybody? No fights. Okay? So it tells us, okay, so that's an anomaly. But it tells us, gives us a little extra piece of information that if he does get in trouble or if he got into an argument, one of those things are a trigger for him and can set him off for a few hours.
So what is your recommendation for how long we should do this? Because I never know if 1 week is going to be enough data or if I have to do 3 or 4 weeks to see if there's a pattern between weeks as opposed to between days.
And is there every day?
Well, your consistency and your pattern is showing you that you're on the right track. If it's like, do you all agree? It's like, does your data agree each time too? If it starts to not agree, maybe your assumption is wrong because you're starting with an assumption, right?
So it's just as long as it
But
takes to see
if it's consistent, right, and you keep getting the same results, you start the intervention and the results go down, then you know you're on the right track.
There's also, I mean, I would say there's probably two other things. One, I always think about, is it even possible to do it in the classroom? You know, I mean, if you're alone in your classroom and I say, you need to collect data for a month, you know, and you do stopwatches and frequency and things, that might not be possible.
Right.
And it may just even be where some teachers are just like, you know, too much work, forget about it. You can do it. So I can only come in for a day or two.
Right.
So that's what you're stuck with, right? So maybe if I don't want to do it Monday, Tuesday, and I want to get a little bit of a comparison, I might come in on Monday because that was the day I was free, and then I'd come in the next Monday. Because now I can compare week to week. It's not perfect, but in the real world, that's what we have to work with, yeah. So.
But that's how RTI works.
Yep.
RTI is you take your baseline data and then you do probes. So you certainly don't want it, because you got to give your intervention time to work.
Exactly, and that's
So once a week, you're going to do your probe on the day that's probably your worst day. To
Yep.
see how you're doing.
And that's the other thing is, so I mean, if you don't want to look for a million days in a row and just all that time, you know you're going to be trying different interventions. So you're basically, you want to get a snapshot of the kid. It's not a perfect snapshot, But you want to get a snapshot that you can then later on, after you've tried check in, check out, time out, whatever interventions you decide to use with the kid, see if it's working, you know? And so, I mean, if you collect it, and then just thinking about, let's say I only collected for 2 hours on the morning of Monday, it's not a good idea to collect for 2 hours in the afternoon on a Friday or on a Thursday. You want to just try and align it so when you're sitting in a meeting and you're making a case for yourself and your interventions, they're not working, oh, you know, we got to do this and that there's some consistency. People are going to be looking for, you know, the holes in the argument. So you're building a case. And when they get to that point where they say, well, give me, you know, you didn't collect it long enough. Say, well, I don't have enough people to collect it long enough. You know, I mean, the realistic thing, and they can't get you on that. I mean, you know.
I recently was asked to collect data on a middle school student who is in mainstream all day with an interpreter, and the teacher and the itinerant teacher and some of the other staff involved feel that he does not utilize that interpreter. So they had asked me to come in to collect data. My first question is this something I need to do all day? Is this something I need to do several days in a row? Is this something I need to do for a week? Because how much time what am I going to know more of that one day I can't cover?
This is a problem similar to what I mean, we've done this before. We want to see the kid is doing better with a one-to-one or without a one-to-one. You're making a case, let's say you're trying to get a one-to-one for a kid. So in this case, you're going to say, well, you're going to actually have to take data on the kid without that aid, and then take data with the kid with the aid and compare the two and see, is there any kind of significant difference between the two? They might be right, they might be wrong, you know, and your job is to, but it has to be comparable. Again, you just don't want to come in and say, I'm going to collect it Tuesday from 10 to 10:30 and then come in on a Friday and collect it for 3 hours. You know what I mean? So you want it to
or in your case, is there more of a time when they would
the student is not watching interpreter.
Well, then you can collect data anytime.
All day, right. And then they gave me some background information about a sign language talk was given to him, and he didn't know sign, but an interpreter was placed with him, and he's refusing to use it because he doesn't know sign. So I have all of this information, which is kind of biased.
I know, because that's a family school issue, and you're just charting behavior. And when you chart behavior, remember, we're not assuming causality. We're putting it in the computer to look at it as a big picture.
Now,
so
I'm thinking of Tally, how many times he watches the interpreter and each class is 40 minutes. So each 40 minutes, I'm just going to sit and tally. I'll just give up my entire day and just tally how many times he watches the interpreter.
For about how long does he watch also?
Okay,
if he's just watching and looking away, or was he watching and staying for 20 minutes?
That's hard to say because I don't watch
my
interpreter.
Well, that's the whole other argument there.
So it's
that's a whole other argument for the school and the family to work on. One question over here real quick.
Doesn't that go back to what we were already talking about? It's the person's perspective, because you're saying, watching an interpreter. Well, that doesn't mean he's not using the interpreter if he's not watching well. You don't always watch the interpreter the entire time. Depends on what, like you said, is more hard of hearing. Well, maybe he's watching the teacher, and then when he misses something, he looks at the interpreter, which is appropriate. You know, you have to then go talk to all the staff and have kind of like that meeting to see, what do you mean that he's not using it? Do you know what is the appropriate way to use an educational interpreter?
Yeah, but remember, this conversation is separate from your data collection, because you're going to have that conversation after you're looking at the data you've collected, and you're going to say, why are the numbers higher here? Why are the numbers not as high here?
Suggesting that do the tally before talking to all the staff what they mean by not using it?
Well, it depends on how many staff are involved to answer that question specifically, would be involved with that. But again, if you're just marking how many times it happens, you're not trying to assume every time what caused it every time. You're marking how many times it happens. And then when you get it in a graph form like this, then we're looking at the bigger picture to say, Are our assumptions correct? Is that represented in the big picture of what's happening? Sherry?
But you're right, you want the operational definition of the behavior, that's why that's on here. So gathering information from everybody on the team is what are you defining as not using the interpreter? Yes, that's where you have the information and then you're collecting the data, that makes sense.
Could you also ask the interpreter, because the interpreters know when they're being watched and not watched, and they're
That was asked not to include the interpreter because she is already frustrated.
That's also, that again is a muddy area too, because that's the school policy of the, does the deaf person have the right to not look at the interpreter when they don't want to? And so that becomes a school parent more of an issue that we don't really have time for because we're like coming up on lunch really fast. Yeah.
The only thing I was going to add to that is an issue for you to educate what it means to have an interpreter and how you're looking, but also if they are data driven, you can still use the data in terms of, even if that kid only looks at that interpreter 4 times, that's 4 times that they need the interpreter.
Well, the thing that I like is that you
could use something, you could use data to bring it to them, but I'd be more inclined to be focusing on educating them on what it means to be an interpreter and use yourself as a personal example that you're not sitting there staring at an interpreter every day.
But again, another example of what data do we choose and what does that data mean? It's all up to us, right? And because it's going to fall back upon it. We're showing this chart to the parents or to our supervisor. It better be right. We're telling them it's right, aren't we? We're using it to back up why we use that intervention in the IEP, and we're being attacked by the advocate who's real smart. And this is our data. Now we want to make sure it's right, don't we? Not just pretty for everybody. Now we want to make sure it's right.
This is just one piece. I mean, I know the RTI and everyone there is saying you got to do this, but it is just one piece. I mean, you still have a conversation. You know what I mean? I mean, in your situation, there's a little bit of preference or politics or something going on there, but that's part of, I mean, you sit down, there's a meeting, people have a conversation, things get fleshed out. So.
All right, two things come to mind as you're bringing this up. First of all is, what's the nature of the class itself? What's the activity? If it's only one speaker versus a group of students. So one of the things that I would look at is how many speakers are going on. The other thing is, I think the tally is going to drive you nuts. One other way to do that, and I've done this, is actually to sit there with a stopwatch. Keep the stopwatch off when they're not looking, keep the stopwatch going, tick, 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 as they're looking, and do a percentage of the time of that class. So if it's a one speaker, they're looking at the teacher, they don't need it, they're using the, if it's a group discussion, then maybe you're seeing that they're going back and forth between the interpreter, and then you're looking the percentage of time in that class that they use the interpreter. So instead of getting into the fight about it, the data says this is the type of task that they needed the interpreter, this is the type of task they didn't need the interpreter. And it's a percentage of that
for
time.
several periods?
Yes, I would.
She asked, could you do this for several periods, and she said yes. Okay. Question. Use the first graph. Also, you can use the first graph for the data. Question?
I don't think it's really a question.
Comment?
It's a comment, but it's a comment from one of yours. I mean, I think you can simplify this by what you said in the beginning. What happens when he has it and what happens when he doesn't, and make that comparison. I know that's a hard thing to do, to leave one of our kids without an interpreter all day, to see what's going to happen to that kid. But if that kid bombs all day, that's simple. That's a simple thing to present. He had the interpreter. This was the tasks that were completed this day successfully. He didn't have an interpreter, and he couldn't answer questions. He couldn't do this. He couldn't do that.
Right, having it on paper.
More simple.
Yes.
That, oh my God, did he watch? He didn't watch. He should watch. He shouldn't watch. We all zone out. It's not our. I agree philosophically what you're saying. We all know that battle is something you're going to have to deal with. But I think they can understand that. We had the same situation. We let this kid try. Listen, you're going to love this. They didn't want to provide an interpreter for Spanish. Okay, just think about that. Okay, first of all, Spanish with an interpreter is really, really hard for any kid. This happens to be a hard of hearing kid. But, you know, without an interpreter, at least to assist in some of that, you can only imagine. It took 2 days for the kid to be like, please, I need my interpreter back. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Because the kid wanted it. The parent was willing to try it. I'm not going to fight a kid if he's going to tell me he's not going to use an interpreter all the time. But he learned it for himself. So to me, in your scenario, what you said the first time is an easier thing. He had it, he did great, he didn't, he failed. But you have to accept that if he doesn't use it and he's successful, that they have their case too. That's
right. That's a good point. That's a good point. And data can go either way. Data can surprise you sometimes. And you got to have your mind open to the fact that this may be more right, more correct than you are in your thinking, right? Because it may prove that you're wrong. And that's when I think it's the most valuable. All right. We're going to move along because, again, we're running head on into lunch here. We're going to talk about the interpretation of the data. You collected the data, we analyzed it, and we've graphed it now.
We actually talked about a lot of this in the last 10, 15 minutes anyways. So you're looking at patterns, there's anomalies, the questions and the story that's behind all this, that's actually going on, the real stuff, and having that conversation and seeing how everything fits together. I mean, it's not a neat, simple thing. This is just one piece to the whole process.
Now the patterns again should form to inform you of what type of intervention you should choose and the manner in which it should be implemented.
And this isn't a perfect world. So let's say Mondays are bad for George, and we obviously saw that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are also kind of bad, but let's say some kids that I've seen, mornings are really, really bad for them, and then they get manageable as the day goes on and even as the week goes on. Maybe we could pool a resource, one extra teacher, because the kid does respond well to a one-to-one, and that's just a simple, easy solution. They have the resources in the building, and we just need the person for 2-3 hours, and voila, we have an answer. We can then recollect data a week later, 2 weeks later, see if it really is making an improvement, and we can prove it. And then we can put it in an IEP or just get a verbal agreement with the supervisor that says, yeah, you can have this person for 2 hours on Monday. Or maybe just an hour every single morning or something like that. You know, in some situations where that's not possible, then you're finding different kinds of interventions. Maybe you have the kid go to the gym and just have them run out their energy if that's what they respond to. And that shows with data that, you know, the kid's ability to come back from that and attend is better than it was before. So
we list at the bottom of this page some potential interventions that you're used to, preferential seating, proximity, including movement in the activities, and high focus tasks when other staff are available in the room. All right, data interpretation. What happens if a pattern cannot be identified? Uh-oh. What then? What does that mean if we don't see a pattern? Does that mean they really have no problems? We just think they do? No? What do you think it means? Let's look at it. More intense data collection is needed. You have to take data for a longer period of time and let the patterns establish themselves.
So the first one is like the check-in, check-out. Sometimes those things don't, or that Spider-Man chart, it's just not rich enough to capture a behavior, you know? It's not going to really show you anything, so that's what I mean by it's just not intense enough. So you need to, as you gradually, you're trying to avoid having to get to that place where you're with the stopwatch and tallying and switching rubber bands. And if you think you can capture what you're trying to do with that particular kid, and it's enough to use just a Spider-Man chart, then God bless you, go use it. If it's not, then that's when you're being told, okay, well, maybe we're trying to get a one-to-one. Whatever the situation is calling for, that's when you have to start moving towards that more intense, time-intense.
If you're not looking for the pattern, maybe it's not the right behavior that you're charting. Maybe you need a different collection format. And again, the more familiar you get with these and you see that they're really not to be something to be afraid of, I think you're going to find out there's more and more of these available free to you, these formats on the internet for you to be able to use at school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. Let's see. If you have used vigorous data collection methods over a long time and no patterns are identified, basically keep on going. Your existing data will become your baseline. Implement an intervention based on your best guess scenario. By this time, you hopefully have a guess as to which is the cause of the difficulty. Informed by your behavior team, social worker, counselor, school psychologist. Recollect your data at a later date and then start comparing over time, a week later, a month later. Is the data still the same? Is the behavior still the same? If patterns were identified, then what do you do? Use the patterns, of course, to identify the right intervention, which one to use to write the behavior or do the behavior analysis, and then pick out the right intervention, implement it, continue to track the behavior. If the intervention is applied, then the behavior is going to go down, right? And then that lets you know that you've chosen the right intervention, and then you can continue with the plan. And go ahead, Daniel.
Just a quick example of if you do see a pattern. We had this one kid who had, every time we put him near other kids, he would have trouble attending, but one-to-one he was totally fine. So we saw that pattern. We did is when he had to do a group situation, we would have him sitting on the end of the table back about 2 feet within his comfort zone, and it worked totally fine. So we were using the data that we had collected just over a day to kind of figure things out and come up with an intervention, or at least inform the intervention.
Okay. How long do I need to collect data? Who knows the answer to this? Right, until you have an intervention that's effective and is working and the behavior is being diminished or going down, of course. You can stop it after the behavior goes down and the problem continues. Then you want to repeat the data collection process, the analysis, and the interpretation. Or, of course, again, consider contacting ISRC. We can come out and assist you with the data collection or getting a template to you, emailing it to you, working with you, getting the, how many columns do you need, how many times or spaces, we could help you with that. Okay? All right, we greatly appreciate you being here and getting your feedback. Any more questions about this? You guys feel more comfortable with this now? If you go home and use it right away and just put in numbers you make up, just get comfortable with it, because I want you to see this not something you should be afraid of. What time are they?
We usually start about 12:15, but it's 12.
Oh.
Is it ready? Is it out there? All right, so we can start.
All right.
Got a question.
A question over here, okay. Yes.
I am wondering, as far as using this here for observation with the students, once the students get medication or without medication?
You want to chart? Yeah, you chart both, and you want to compare them? It depends upon what your question is. What is it you want to know? The behavior you're looking at should answer your question, and so your observation is.
Okay, so say if a person gets the medication, their behavior is fine, do you still document that data?
Well, if you want to show somebody the huge difference in their behavior, maybe their parent or maybe your supervisor, I'm not exactly sure who you'd want to show that. You certainly want to do that, because that would be a very obvious, easy case and wouldn't take long to chart it if there's such a quick change like that.
Also, I mean, there was a situation recently where the kid was doing great on medication. The family stopped giving the kid medication. His behavior deteriorated. And they had data from before when he was on the medication, and then they collected data when he was off the medication. They could show the family the difference, and it was a significant difference. So just maybe have a little bit of that backup data that if in the future, you know, they take him off the medicine.
Right, good point. Any other questions? All right, thanks for being so attentive. We'll take our break and have our lunch. Everybody outside, and eat all you can. We have plenty.